Ever find yourself daydreaming, like wishing for the impossible?
Like winning the lottery?
Well, yeah, I mean that's definitely up there.
Or maybe finally understanding string theory.
Okay, okay. I see where you're going with this. But let's get a little more, shall we say, romantic.
Romance. All right, lay it on me.
What about, say, dating Superman? I mean, on the surface, it sounds pretty amazing, right? Soaring through the sky, heroic rescues, the whole nine yards.
Yeah, I guess. But you got to think about the practicalities.
Practicality. Like what?
Well, for starters, he's an alien.
Okay, yeah, sure, Kryptonian and all that. But he looks human, right?
Looks can be deceiving, my friend.
I mean, he's basically just a really powerful dude.
He's not just a human with powers. He's an extraterrestrial. His entire evolutionary path is different.
Different how?
Think of it this way. You know how Australian marsupials kind of resemble mammals here on Earth?
Yeah, I guess. Kangaroos and stuff.
Right. They might fill similar ecological niches, but their underlying biology is completely different.
So you're saying Superman's more like a kangaroo than a human?
Well, not literally, of course, but the point is his biology, his physiology, it's all alien.
Okay.
So, what does that mean for a relationship with a human, like, say, Lois Lane?
Well, this is where things get interesting.
Mhm.
Luckily, we have a brilliant essay to guide us. Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex by Larry Niven. He really dives deep into this, and let me tell you, it gets pretty wild.
Niven really flips the script on the whole superhero romance trope. Instead of focusing on the usual obstacles, secret identities, supervillains, he tackles something way more
The
fundamental.
biology.
Exactly.
And he asks a really thought-provoking question.
Yeah, what is it?
Is Superman even capable of a safe, let alone mutually pleasurable, intimate relationship with a human being?
Whoa, that's a big one.
It is. And, spoiler alert, the answer is not as straightforward as you might think. So buckle up, because we're about to go on a deep dive into the very real, within this fictional context, reasons why Lois Lane should be very careful what she wishes for.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's start with the basics. We've established Superman is an alien, biologically speaking.
Right, so what does that mean for something as fundamental as attraction?
Well, Niven speculates that Kryptonians might have, pheromones or other biological signals that draw attraction.
Like a kryptonite aphrodisiac.
Not quite. But these signals, whatever they are, would be totally alien to a human like Lois.
So no sparks flying, literally.
More like a complete mismatch. Niven even suggests that what feels natural and right for a Kryptonian, in that department might feel incredibly wrong to a human.
He goes as far as to say it might feel, and I quote, like sodomy.
He even brings up the legal implications of that.
Yeah, really makes you think.
So right off the bat, we have a massive biological hurdle. It kind of makes you wonder how any romantic connection even starts.
Well, Niven acknowledges Superman's adopted human behavior, growing up as Clark Kent.
Oh.
He suggests Superman has remarkable self-control.
But on a purely instinctual level, those missing biological signals could be a deal breaker.
It makes you question the nature of their attraction. Is it all just emotional and intellectual, overriding those deep-seated biological urges?
Fascinating. But let's move on to the, shall we say, more physical aspects of this hypothetical relationship.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about what happens when things get intimate,
This is where things get a bit complicated.
to put it mildly.
Niven really goes there. He talks about, the act of intercourse itself and how things could go very wrong.
Very wrong is an understatement.
He points to studies suggesting that a human orgasm involves a temporary loss of muscle control, like a pleasurable epileptic attack.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Now think about Superman's strength. We're talking about a guy who can accidentally leave fingerprints in steel.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Imagine that kind of involuntary muscle contraction during,
Not a good picture.
Niven describes it as a pretty gruesome scene.
Gruesome doesn't even begin to cover it. He paints a picture of Superman, in the heat of the moment, literally crushing Lois.
Ripping her open. Gutting her, he says, like a trout.
Talk about a mood killer.
Yeah. It's a pretty stark illustration of the dangers. And that's just the beginning.
Oh, no. There's more.
Oh, yeah. We haven't even talked about, the other biological aspect of intimacy,
You mean?
ejaculation. It's an involuntary process, right?
Right.
And if we assume Kryptonian physiology ramps everything up to 11, well,
Forget fireworks. We're talking about a full-blown artillery barrage.
something like that. Niven theorizes that Superman's, would be expelled with the muzzle velocity of a machine gun bullet.
He even jokes about the Kent farmhouse probably being riddled with holes during Superboy's puberty. Makes you feel for Ma and Pa Kent, doesn't it?
Poor folks. And what about any early girlfriends?
Yeah, that's a whole other deep dive.
So we've established that traditional intercourse is out of the question. So Niven then explores a seemingly safer alternative.
Artificial insemination.
Exactly. But even that opens up a whole new can of superpowered worms.
Oh boy. Here we go.
First of all, getting a viable sperm sample is a feat in itself.
Yeah, how do you even?
Niven suggests Superman would have to fly all the way to the moon to,
To ejaculate. On the moon.
Think about it. With the speeds involved, if he did it on Earth, the atmosphere would just vaporize everything.
Makes sense, I guess. But still, the moon. That's pretty far to go for a sperm sample.
And then there's the whole issue of collection. Imagine Superman fumbling around with a test tube on the lunar surface.
And that's assuming the test tube can even withstand the impact.
Right. Which brings us to the real mind blower. The properties of Kryptonian sperm.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff.
You see, if Kryptonians under a yellow sun gain all these incredible powers...
It stands to reason their reproductive cells would inherit some of those traits.
Exactly. We're not talking about regular sperm here. We're talking about super sperm.
Like indestructible microscopic missiles.
Pretty much. Niven speculates they'd be resistant to heat, cold, vacuum, toxins, you name it. And get this, they might even be able to travel at near light speed.
Near light speed sperm.
Yeah.
Okay, that officially wins the award for most terrifying mental image of the day.
It's a lot of process. But let's say, for argument's sake, we manage to collect a sample, contain it, and bring it back to Earth. The act of insemination itself becomes a whole new nightmare.
Why? What happens?
Niven describes a scenario where millions of these super sperm, upon entering Lois's reproductive system, basically overwhelm and obliterate the human egg. He calls it a microscopic gang rape.
Oh my God. Poor Lois.
And it gets worse. With the egg destroyed, these millions of indestructible sperm would then just scatter, leaving millions of tiny perforations throughout her abdomen.
Leading to peritonitis and a potentially fatal infection. This is getting really dark, really fast.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop there. Imagine these near light-speed sperm escaping Lois's body and rampaging through Metropolis.
Tiny sonic booms, microscopic wormholes, and that eerie blue Cherenkov radiation. It's like a microscopic apocalypse.
But perhaps the most unsettling and darkly comedic outcome is the possibility of mass unintended pregnancies.
Hold on. You're saying Superman could accidentally impregnate thousands of women?
It's a possibility. Imagine these rogue super sperm encountering unfertilized eggs in women he's never even met.
That is without a doubt the weirdest and most ethically complicated consequence of superpowers I've ever heard. But it gets weirder.
Oh, yeah. Niven throws in this almost surreal aside about what might happen if red kryptonite were involved.
Red kryptonite, the stuff that gives Superman bizarre mutations.
Exactly. He suggests they could make the sperm, get this, earthworm-sized and capable of fertilizing beach balls.
Earthworm-sized sperm, fertilizing beach balls. What in the... Okay, I need a minute to process this.
It's ridiculous, sure. But it just goes to show how unpredictable and bizarre things can get when you mix alien biology with our own.
Well, okay. So, traditional intercourse is a no-go. Artificial insemination is a recipe for disaster. What options are left?
Niven explores some, shall we say, creative solutions. One involves Superman using his microscopic vision and maybe some tiny tweezers to carefully select a single sperm for insemination.
Like a superpowered fertility specialist.
Kind of. But even then, there's still a risk of that single super sperm causing internal damage. So the only really viable option, according to Niven, is pretty drastic.
Let me guess. Kryptonite.
Yep. Specifically gold kryptonite, the stuff that permanently depowers a Kryptonian.
So Superman has to give up his powers to have a safe baby? That's a pretty big sacrifice.
Niven calls it drastic, but it might be the only way. They also consider exposing the seminal fluid to gold kryptonite before insemination.
Okay, so let's say somehow Lois does get pregnant. Surely things get easier from there, right?
Oh, not quite. If Kryptonian genes are dominant, and let's face it, they probably are, then we're talking about a super baby. And that presents a whole new set of dangers for Lois.
Like what? Flying kicks in the womb.
Something like that. Niven wonders if the baby could accidentally use its X-ray vision or heat vision inside the womb.
Sterilizing Lois or worse.
Yeah.
Yikes. And then there's the actual birth. I mean, a super baby kicking its way out.
Not a pretty picture. Niven suggests it could kill both Lois and the baby. So yeah, having Superman's baby is a risky proposition, to say the least.
So what's the solution? Kryptonite diapers. A lead-lined womb.
Niven throws out a few more ideas. A kryptonite belt for Lois to somehow regulate the baby's powers.
Sounds dangerous.
Right? Impossible to calibrate safely. And what about using Supergirl as a surrogate?
Ah, the classic superhero solution.
Yeah.
Pass the problem off to a teenage girl.
Well, Niven immediately dismisses that idea, mainly because they're cousins. He calls anyone suggesting otherwise a cad. Plus, imagine the social implications of Supergirl's secret identity showing up pregnant.
Yeah, that's a PR nightmare waiting to happen. So what's the final crazy solution?
Get this. They actually consider implanting the fetus into Superman himself.
Wait, you're saying a pregnant Superman flying around Metropolis with the baby bump?
Exactly. Niven seems to relish this image. He even mentions Batman's reaction and the jokes prisoners would come up with.
Oh, I can only imagine. But how would you even perform a cesarean section on a guy with invulnerable skin?
That's a good question. It kind of highlights the absurdity of it all.
So after all that, what's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think Niven's essay, while hilarious, really drives home the point that superhero romances, especially those involving aliens, are way more complicated than they appear. We tend to gloss over the biological realities.
Right. Lois Lane might dream of being Superman's girl, but the reality could be far more dangerous and, frankly, bizarre than she ever imagined.
And it makes you wonder if Superman, who at least looks human, has these kinds of problems.
What about other superheroes? Aliens with completely different biologies.
Right. Imagine the potential nightmares. The implications are mind-boggling. It's a whole universe of potentially disastrous first dates.
Well, folks, there you have it. A deep dive into the complicated and often hilarious love life of Superman. Thanks for joining us.